Well, all weekend long, folks, we'll be telling you a little bit about some of the pioneers of women's tackle football. And we're going to start here on our first game with talking about the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets. Back in 1926, they were an upstart team in the National Football League. They used women's football players in exhibition games during halftime. Frankfurt is in North Philly. It's actually one of those neighborhoods of Philadelphia. Played there until the early 30s and were eventually replaced with the Philadelphia Eagles. So, well, as I mentioned in the first half, all weekend long, we're going to tell you about some of the pioneers of women's football. And this lady that you see on your screen is Laverne Toad Wise. She's the first woman to score a point in a football game. She was a kicker for a high school in Alabama in 1939 and 1940. Wise was featured in Life magazine and in newsreels all over the country at the time for her efforts playing in Alabama. She kicked for the high school there in Alabama in 1939 and 40. Didn't play any sports after high school, though. She did run a sporting goods store with her husband for 39 years. So there's another one of those pioneers of women's football. That's Laverne Toad Wise. Well, all weekend long, we're spotlighting some of the ladies and some of the teams and everybody who's had a play in the history and development of women's tackle football. This lady that you see on your screen is Patricia Palinkis. Hopefully I got that right. She's the first woman who played on a men's semi-pro team. Back in 1970, she was a placeholder for the Orlando Panthers. So Patricia Palinkis, one of the first women to play in a semi-pro game. And all weekend long, we'll spotlight a few more people and teams and leagues who have helped women's tackle football become what you see today. This weekend, we'll be spotlighting some of the pioneers of women's tackle football. And the ladies that you're looking at on your screen are the Toledo Troopers. The first real women's football league, the National Women's Football League, was formed in 1974. The league expanded to 14 teams by its second season. That includes those Toledo Troopers, who, believe it or not, were actually honored during last year's bowl games by the IWFL. The National Women's Football League, formed in 74, lasted until 1988. It was the last consistent pro football league for women until, again, the late 90s and early 2000s. So more pioneers, the Toledo Troopers and several other of those teams back in the National Women's Football League. Evans is yet another quarterback for the Vixen. We talked a little bit about the championship preview. The Vixen, one of the teams that really got the ball rolling in terms of women's football. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the pioneers of the ladies' game. And we're going to get a timeout now by the West, so why don't we just continue that conversation and talk about 1999. That's when the New York Sharks flag football team was challenged by the Minnesota Vixen to a tackle game. New York Sharks had just about 2 months to prepare for that game, and Minnesota traveled to New York to play the game, and the Sharks converted a tackle team in just under 2 months and shocked Minnesota in that game 12-6, and that kind of led to the conversation that, hey, maybe we should start this up. We talked yesterday about the very first football league, the Women's Football Tackle League. That was the National Women's Football League back in 1974. They lasted until 1988, and it wasn't until this game happened, the Vixen taking on the Sharks. Of course, both of those teams still around today, and both of them in the IWFL. So again, pioneers of women's tackle football. We'll be talking about those as the day and night goes on. While we have a couple of moments, let's talk about another pioneer of women's tackle football. And we're up to 2014 now. We started back in 1926. We're up to 2014. This is Jen Welter. She was the first female player to play as a non-kicking player on a men's team. That happened with the indoor team, the Texas Revolution of the Indoor Football League, just a year ago. Welter now coaches with the Revolution, so Jen Welter, one of our pioneers as well.